a zigzag stitch. And a zigzag stitch is a great one for beginners to learn because you can use it on the inside seams of some of your fabrics and some of your makes. Specifically if you have fabric that frays quite a lot, so if the threads are coming away on the inside of the fabric, so you can use the zigzag stitch to cut down on the amount of fraying on the inside of your projects. It's also a nice decorative stitch, and it's quite nice to do a zigzag stitch instead of a straight stitch sometimes. So it gives you a little option to do something different. So here you'll see my zigzag stitch is number 7. So I'm just going to put my cursor back across here, and I'm going to change my stitch selection to 7. And you can see this is giving me quite a wide stitch at 5 and 1.5 length. So let's see what that looks like. So I'm just going to stitch it on the fabric for now, just to show you what it looks like. And you will see the needle will do something unusual. It's already starting slightly over to the left, but the zigzag stitch moves left and right across the fabric. So it's moving in that gap in your presser foot, back and forth, creating those zigzags. You will also see that the hole in the middle of the presser foot, the needle is going either side of it, and that's a really good guide for when you want to use it on the edge of your fabric. So I'll show you that now. Just cut it, I'll show you my zigzag stitches. They look very nice. So if you're using it on the edge of your fabric, to seal the edges and stop the frays, what we want to do is we want to line the edge of the fabric with the little split in the middle, or the middle position on your presser foot. So when we do that, you will see what will happen. There we go. So you can see that the zigzag is going on and off the edge of the fabric, and it's enclosing the edge of the fabric and just keeping it under control. And that's really useful for the inside of your projects, just to make them nice and neat and tidy. There we are. So we'll pull that off. Oops. There we are. So you can see the zigzag has gone across the edge of the fabric. It's holding the edge of the fabric in place, so it's cutting down on those frays. So if we're using the zigzag stitch, you can play around with the different measurements here. So we can change the width and we can change the length. So let me change the length. We'll leave the width at 5, and we're just going to move the length up to, say, a 3. And we'll just stitch next to the one that we did previously, and you'll be able to see what the difference is. And this is a great thing to do to get to know your machine, just on a piece of scrap fabric that you can have a little bit of a play around with, and you can even write on the fabric to say this one was a 3 length and a 5 width, and then you can have a little guide to see what your different stitches look like. So you can see that it's still as wide, but the stitches are longer apart. Now if I was to move, let's move the other one back, let's move the other one down. So we'll put that down to a 1.5 and a 3 length. And let's see what happens. So you can see my zigzag is much shallower now. It's not as deep as it was. And obviously these, if you're using it as a decorative stitch, these all have different properties. So you might like one of them for one project and one for another. So there you go, that's the basics of sewing. We've covered how to move your presser foot up and down, controlling your speed with your foot pedal. We've talked about the different stitches, we've talked about seam allowance, and all of those things aren't as scary as you thought they were in the first place. One thing we would say is really beneficial for beginners is to practice. So give yourself an hour, make yourself a nice cup of tea, and get a little bit of scrap fabric, maybe an old duvet cover or a pillowcase or an old t-shirt you're not using, and just practice the stitches. Practice changing your length, changing your width, changing it to a different stitch, and also practice your speed control and moving the fabric around, doing your reversing, changing direction. Also practice threading your machine, and that will become a muscle memory, something that you will do automatically without thinking about it. And every time you do that, coming to the machine the next time will be so much easier. So have a little practice, have a little play, and then we'll come back and show you some more basics about your machine.